like in some other states. What do you think would have to happen?
Well, I think about 1.5 million people would drop dead of heart attacks, and that would solve our problem, because they'd be the lunks. They're the leeches who could go to work but don't want to.
Or working off the books.
Oh, a lot of working off the books. You know, it kills me, these cavones who brag about working off the books. Yeah, I work for my brother-in-law, Charlie. I'm off the books. I get a couple of deuces every week, off the books. What's a couple of deuces, anyway? What is that? What is a couple of deuces? What is that? What is that talk? What is that?
Couple of deuces?
Yeah, you know what it is? $400. That's what it is. A deuce is $200.
Right.
So a guy gets a couple of deuces, that's $400.
And Cuomo wants to increase the welfare.
Well, of course Cuomo wants to. Do you know, listen, I have a recording taken of Mario Cuomo a little over 50 years ago in June when he was born, city of New York. This is taken he had a nice little bassinet there. And his mother thought she was going to have a girl, so they had to put Mario in pink. Can you imagine Mario in pink? But anyway, there he was, and here's a recording of what he said as a baby. Listen.
I want welfare for the people. Welfare.
See?
Yeah, New York's a great state. It's one of the only states where you get paid to drink beer all day.
Yeah, there's a lot of motor de femmes sitting all over town just doing that right now.
Drunk by 9 o'clock in the morning.
That's right. Galloping Alzheimer's disease from all of this, though. So there's a bright side.
That's right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
37 minutes. Well, that slams the lid on things for today until Sunday, 2 in the afternoon. This is Bob Grant reminding you your influence counts. Use it. Get Gaddafi. A couple of years ago, the Soviet Union was putting in place one new SS-20 intercontinental ballistic or medium-range ballistic missile every single week. This, in addition to the SS-18 rockets that they had already targeted on all of Western Europe. It had gotten to the point that now, listen to this, there are 20 rockets, at least 20 rockets targeted for each city in Western Europe. In trying to redress that balance, we wanted to put in the Pershing rockets. And when it was announced we were going to put Pershing rockets in place in Western Europe, the commie skunks out of the Kremlin got all their stooges to start demonstrating, got all their stooges in this country to start demonstrating as well. And heaven forbid it had been Jimmy Carter who had been president, you know we would have backed down. But thanks to Ronald Reagan, we did not back down. The Soviet Union, meeting on disarmament talks in Geneva at that time, said if you deploy the Pershing missiles, we're going to walk out of the arms talks and we'll never, never come back to the arms agreement table until you pull those Pershing rockets out of there. Well, we put the Pershings in and we haven't taken them out, and the Soviet Union has come back to the bargaining table. But to save face, as one commentator put it, to save face, we agree to call it new arms talks. And in a very unusual move, Andrei Gromyko, the iron face, the stone face, gave their version of a press conference in Moscow at 10 o'clock our time, and sounded absolutely, by contrast, positive about things. Now, the whole point of what I'm driving at is this. If we are going to listen to the pinkos, the out-and-out commies, and the people with wide yellow streaks down their backs, and the plain dumbbells, then, of course, we would never do anything to ensure our own enlightened self-interest. All these people biting their fingernails, oh, no, we mustn't be firm, we must be flexible. Well, I say hooray for Ronald Reagan and hooray for the fact that he remained firm. And the Soviet Union is talking and they're talking to someone that they respect.
Oh, he could have shot the perp.
You think it's that easy? Have you ever fired a gun?
Sir, Bob Grant, I have a gun right here in the house.
I didn't ask you if you have a gun. I've asked you, have you ever fired a gun?
I have fired a gun many, many times, and it's so easy. I'll put it to you.
Well, you mean on a target, at a target range, or at a person?
I have had 3 occasions. This is Mo. I've called to you on this subject.
Did you thwart a robbery? Is that what you did?
3 times just by showing the gun, Bob.
You're not 80 years old, are you?
No,
Uh-huh.
but it's...
I don't think you're anywhere near 80 years old, but you want an 80-year-old guy to walk around with a gun.
I feel like this, Bob. It's so easy to learn to shoot a gun. When I go to Las Vegas,
You ever seen a person's hand at 80 years old?
I agree.
Even when they're in good condition, the hand trembles a little bit.
Okay, what about that man out in Los Angeles who was 81 and he shot a guy and saved his life in doing so?
Yeah, and I'm glad that he did what he did, but by and large, I don't think we should recommend 80-year-old people walking around carrying guns.
All right, Bob. In this case, I agree with you. But now, okay, he shouldn't have gone into that building, and this is why I'm calling. And I was listening this morning.
You're making me nervous, Mo. You got this hesitation delivery that makes me nervous.
Well, because I feel that I'm going to be interrupted, but I would like to say something.
Well, you know what? You're not going to be interrupted. You're going to be terminated any second now.
Well, it's your privilege, of course, but I have something important to say, really.
You have something important? You have something important? Okay, Mo, what is it?
It's so easy, Bob, to shoot a gun that there's a certain pistol range that I go to when I'm in Las Vegas.
All right, I'm waiting to hear the important stuff. You said you had something important to say. Where is it?
Yes. I say this. Do not be in a situation where your life is in danger without having the proper tools.
All right. Hey, how about a guy going in with a chair and a whip like Frank Buck, remember?
Yeah, I remember Frank Buck.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Mo. And you know why they're going to hear that, Amy? Because City Correction Commissioner Jacqueline McMickens has announced today, just a little while ago, that a new facility is being built to unite mothers and their infants. Now, what I want to know is, who are these women who are having babies and in jail? Who are the fathers of these people having babies? Why does society allow such antisocial misfit skunks to have babies when we only have to pay? They're going to have in the Rikers Island facility an infirmary for prenatal, natal, and postnatal care. They're going to have a nursery program, which will be run by the Montefiore Medical Center for the Rikers Island Jail, which houses prisoners awaiting trial. And it goes on and on. I'll tell you something. There's going to be a time, it's not going to be tomorrow, it's not going to be the day after, but there's going to be a time that enough people are going to realize that my call for mandatory sterilization in this country is not the cry of a fascist madman, but the cry of a person who says, hey, attention must be paid to our most serious problem. Attention must be paid to the cause of some of our other most serious problems. And the only way to deal with the problem is to have a program whereby these individuals do not bring more warriors onto the rolls, do not contribute more enemies of society, and even help themselves, because maybe if they didn't have all these babies, maybe they'd have some time to devote to their own education and their own improvement. It's when we get these recidivists, when we get these individuals who, I don't mean just committed one crime in an act of passion and probably will never do anything wrong again, but when we get these hardened career criminal types, it's stupid, A, to leave them out. And you know what? It's even stupid to keep them alive in jail. They should be put up against the wall and shot down, or given lethal injections, or somehow or other killed, destroyed. They do no good. Why do we spend $40,000 a year to keep them living in such high style? Why? I mean, you know, I'm saying something's going to shock a lot of people, but stop and think about the logic behind it. Why do we keep them alive? Mario Cuomo, the other day in an interview with me, which will be played a week from tomorrow, he contradicts himself all over the place. He says, on the one hand, he says, you know, there are people that are for torture, they're for mutilation. I say put them in jail for life. That'll really torture. That'll really punish them. It seems contradictory when he calls the death penalty torture, and yet says we'll really punish them by keeping them in jail. He says keep them in jail, no hope of parole. Well, he knows better. He's a lawyer. He knows everybody gets out. Nathan Leopold got out. They said he'd never see the light of day, that he'd die in jail. They don't die in jail. They do get out. But
I don't know if you got to read today's Newsday.
no, I have enough to keep up with,
I know you
with
do.
other papers.
But I was
And besides, you want to know something? I don't like Newsday.
I don't either anymore.
No, I don't like it. It's so far to the left they make me sick. Their editorials are, I think their editorials are insipid.
Yeah, it's not really what I called you for. I was listening to you.
Oh, God, another one. Why do people always do that? That's not what I really called about.
Well,
No.
Well, could we?
I would not rule it out. Huh?
Could we sue the city for not giving us our constitution?
Oh, come on, sue the
Well, I
city.
put in for a police permit for a gun that
The
would
city.
give
I'll
it to me.
buy you a cup of coffee. Forget about suing the city. I have to laugh. Anyway, sue the
We
city.
have no constitution then.
Listen, go to Ariel Sharon or General Westmoreland. Get a couple of bucks from them. Okay? Thank you. Betty,
The fairest doctrine, which was ruled on in 1950.
I subscribe to that doctrine, by the way.
You do subscribe.
Yeah, because we'd open up Pandora's box. We'd open up Pandora's box, and everybody would say, well, they have a right to sue. And with all the Melvin Belli types roaming around, all the ambulance chasers roaming around, all the shysters roaming around, people would be suing even worse than what they're suing now. And it's bad enough as it is. Put that up, because if he's guilty of any tax transgressions, believe you me, the IRS is not going to waste time. You know, we may talk about slaps on the wrist when it comes to the courts, but the IRS is like the Gestapo or the KGB. They don't mess around. So if all this focuses attention on Zucchero from the IRS and they find something wrong, then he'll catch it.
Long-time listener, so I won't even ask you how you are. I know better. Back to this...
Thank you, Felix. I appreciate that. And because you understand what's really important, not the silly thing of, how are you, Pop? I'm fine. How are you? Fine? Okay.
That's right.
Because you understand that, I'll tell you. I don't feel so good. Go ahead, Felix. Talk more the next time, okay? Okay. Just getting his feet wet. He'd probably become a regular someday. Oh, heaven forbid we have enough of those. WABC Talk Radio. Hello. Speaking of regulars, where's Billy of Brooklyn? I made him a star, and I don't hear from him. Every time when that big buffoon runs around saying, don't tamper with Social Security, what he fails to remember is every time those people get a raise, us working people have to pay for it. I know people who have hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe even $1 million in various instruments, bonds, money market funds, property, etc., living high off the hog. Still, they get that Social Security check.
Aren't they entitled to it?
No, in my opinion, they shouldn't be entitled to it.
They paid-
When I told you that Social Security they didn't pay into it. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That word entitled kills me. With that, she hung up. I don't blame her. If somebody were shouting at me, I'd hang up too, except she deserved my hanging up. Aren't they entitled to it? I just got through saying they didn't pay into it. About how to clean subway cars when they're blitzed with spray paint by those brigands, by those marauders, by those mutants. Instead of focusing on getting rid of the perpetrators,
Right.
we knock ourselves out trying to come up with a certain type of paint that can be washed easily. You know.
Yeah.
That's like saying everybody ought to learn medical first aid so that if we get shot, we can better help each other to get first aid on our way to the emergency station at Roosevelt Hospital. You know, don't bother about locking up all those thugs. Don't bother about arresting them. Just try to figure out how we could survive a gunshot wound. Give everybody a bulletproof vest, but don't take away the skunks who are marauding the subways, the buses, the streets, and so forth. Until then, this is Bob Grant reminding you, your influence counts. Use it. Get Gaddafi. There's some ragtag ne'er-do-wells, some bums hanging around out on the streets here in Washington. These are lost souls who would be better off taking cyanide or strychnine or some such potion These are people who, I guess, were in some kind of demonstration in the 1960s, had a camera focused on them, a microphone shoved in their faces, and that was their only moment of glory in an otherwise ignominious, valueless life. Because all they do is demonstrate. For example, there's going to be one demonstration led by no less a personage than the Prince of Push, Jesse.Jackson, Jaime's best friend. He's going to lead a march from, I believe it's Farragut Park, to about a block away from the White House, praying for jobs. Praying for jobs. Do you know how many help-wanted signs proliferate this land? I don't know what kind of jobs they want. I can well imagine. Jobs where nobody loses anything. In other words, they don't lose time traveling to and from work because they don't have to go. And since the checks are mailed to their home, nobody loses time picking up the check. At any rate, there's that bunch gonna have a demonstration. And get a load of this one, even more ludicrous perhaps. An anti-war demonstration. Now what the heck? What war are they demonstrating against?
I meant to tell you, you weren't in the Columbus Day parade over here, were you, this year?
No, I got tired of it.
Really?
It got to be a big bore. And I tell you why it got to be a big bore. You know why? Because all those Gabon politicians used it to campaign. I got sick and tired of being on the platform as the speaker, and one guy after another say, don't forget, mention so-and-so's here. Mention so-and-so. Mention so-and-so. She's running for judge of the Supreme Court. Mention Senator Gavon. Mention Congressman Spacone. Don't forget to mention Attorney General Jadrul. On and on and on and on. It was supposed to be Columbus Day, not campaign day. So I told Rudy Masita and the gang, I said, forget about it.
Right, of course.
They try to make political hay out of it. You know, and Bobby Abrams, every time I turn around, it's Columbus Day parade, and Bobby Abrams is up there trying to look very Italian, waving an Italian-American flag. He gets introduced, and then he disappears. I look around, and he's gone. And I say, Bobby, you want I got old? And he's gone. Where did he go? He's got a trapdoor on the platform. I swear, there's a special platform trapdoor so that Bobby Abrams can appear, smile, wave, and then he's gone. Out at all, they're doing
None about that, man. Listen,
they're doing time.
This is racist America, you know.
Yeah.
You remember they signed 377 treaties with the so-called American Indians that broke everyone.
Yeah, well, listen, pal, you're shouting too loud. It's too late. Get off the phone, will you? For heaven's sake.
You're going to hell, man.
Will you get off the phone, please? Thank you. Yeah, very nice gentleman there. As a matter of fact, he saved us money. We didn't have to use a phone for him. Let's see what else. Oh, yes, until tomorrow, your influence counts. Use it. Get Gaddafi. Lowell Weicker. You know, Lowell Weicker's making me sound like a liar. Because here I said he couldn't even get arrested, and he goes ahead and gets himself arrested. Now, who are these guys trying to kid? The Lowell Weickers, the people like that. Who are they trying to kid, making a big show of going in front of the South African embassy to protest that country's policies of racial segregation? Weicker's quelling. He's quelling because there he is in a photograph on the front page of the Washington Post with a Washington, D.C. police officer putting the handcuffs on, and he's standing there quelling. That means he's proud. He's oozing. He's saying, see, look what I did. What I did for love. That act, to me, seems so phony. What are we going to do? We're going to have everybody who's ever run for public office or hopes to run for public office, he's got to get in the act. I wish they'd stop taking their pictures. You know, if Weicker didn't have his picture taken, he'd make sure he went back tomorrow to get arrested until he did get his picture taken. But Warren Berger I think, is magnificent Chief Justice. And you mark my words, after he's passed from the scene, they're going to be rereading his speeches, and they're going to say, you know, and I'm told when I say they, I mean some of these liberal pipsqueaks, some of these bleeding heart, limp-wristed skunks. They're going to say, you know, he was a great judge. They'll miss him after he's gone.
I agree.
But I hope that we can replace Thurgood Marshall and William Brennan. The sooner the better. I think in a civilized society, we should expect that we are protected from those amongst us who are mutations of humankind.
That's correct.
And therefore, I don't blame people for feeling that they should be protected. That's why in New York we pay a lot of taxes to maintain a lot of policemen.
I hear you, Bob.
And we do have a lot of fine policemen. Of course, we have a lot of weirdos that don't belong on a police department that got in only because some jerk judge said you have to have so many women and so many this and so many that. That's what concerns me, is the quotaizing, the pigment testing, and gender testing of American society. That's what bothers me. That's what I think is going to really tear us apart, because instead of saying we want the best, we want the most capable, we want the most equipped, we want the most suitable person for this particular job, we say we have to have so many of these and so many of those and so many of these and so many of those. Okay. I see some of these broads walking around 105 pounds, checking themselves out with a little powder puff and a little compact. And I can't say, officer, could you tell me what I should do about that man that's trying to attack? I can't, you know. I want to say, listen, honey, don't worry, I'll protect you.
It's our or your individual responsibility to protect yourself.
Well, I don't go along with that. I don't go along with that. Apparently, you want to see a vigilante society because you keep hammering away at that. What are we going to do? Just stand there? Guys beating us up? We say, I don't have a responsibility. Of course we're going to fight back.
No, sir. What I want is to have a little more grassroots.
All right. We'll have it. Okay, open up a karate school and call it the Grassroots Karate School, okay? Thanks to Jimmy McGuire. My thanks to David Rao. Most of all, my thanks to you. Get Gaddafi!
It states that the president is looking to tax compensation benefits, disability, veterans' disability. And I was just thinking to myself, as you spoke to the senator, that the senator is for the president's cuts. And one of the cuts is to cut veterans' benefits. In this time, when we're talking to the Russians...
What veteran are you of, Phil? You yourself, you.
World War II.
I see. And how long do you get benefits? I mean, how long does this go on?
Well, I'll tell you.
You know, I'm sick and tired of guys like you, Phil, who probably shot a rifle on a rifle range somewhere in Far Rockaway, and now in perpetuity, every time we turn around, we got to dig into our pockets to pay you some kind of cockamamie benefit.
Mr. Grant, I lost part of myself in World War II. It's not fair for you to stand there.
Well, then you're getting the benefit, right? Then you're getting a benefit.
A benefit?
Are you getting disability, Phil?
I'm not getting a benefit.
Are you getting disability?
I am getting service-connected disability.
You are getting service-connected. How much? 10%, 20%?
Quite a bit more than that.
Well, don't be vague, Phil. How much more?
That's the question I'm raising.
Ladies and gentlemen, Phil is vague. You know why Phil is vague? Because Phil is afraid to just tell the truth.
I am getting disability for a part of my extremity that's no longer with me.
Part of your what?
extremity that's no longer with me.
Why are you again being...
Why don't you, why are you...
Why so cryptic? What do you mean part of an extremity? What, your foot, your arm, your hand?
Instead of listening to what I'm trying to talk about, you know, I'm not the only one out here that's disgusted with you. You know,
I didn't know you were discussing with me, Phil.
On the other end of the phone, and you talk to a person that served in a war, and you don't even give him a chance, and right away you're talking about firing a rifle at Far Rockaway someplace.
Yeah, Phil, I'll tell you why. Because you have called with great regularity throughout the years.
So is this your way?
And I detect a pattern of instability in your approach to everything.
Oh, you do?
Yes.
Well, how about your approach in telling me about my disability, that I fired a rifle? Why don't we meet someplace?
Listen, there's a guy who had a lentil bowl of soup hit him on the head. He wants me to go beat up a guy who did that. Maybe you can come with me. We'll beat up that guy together.
You know,
Kill Keith. Okay, that's the end of Phil. All right. Okay. That's the end of Phil. Let's take another call. I hope did they get it in master control in New York? Did they? I hope so. Okay. You and I know party labels don't mean all that much. There are a lot of old folks there, the Brighton Beach area, who feel that even if Hitler ran on a Democratic ticket, he could run against Moses, who'd be running on a Republican ticket. They'd still vote for Hitler because they'd figure, geez, if he's on the Democratic ticket, he must be all right. You see, there's some old folks who, when they hear the word Democrat, they actually have an orgasm. I've seen them. They get all... Yeah. A look comes across their face. They go bananas. It's pathetic, really.
Yeah, well, same position as so-called subway vigilante. I was in a fast food restaurant in Brooklyn, and I had my portable on, and I was eating, and I had these two males approach me, and they actually said to me, "You ain't no real peace officer. Give me your radio." So they said to them, "I'm not going to give you my radio." So they said they were off. So I drew my revolver at them, and the end up was one of them had a Saturday night special. They were two youths.
And what happened?
So I had to arrest them. They attempted robbery on a police officer.
Too bad you didn't blow them away. Too bad.
And
until then, Bob Grant reminding you, your influence counts. Use it. Get Gaddafi. And he's also the man who, in 1980, at the Republican convention, stood at the microphone to announce the California delegation's votes for then-candidate Ronald Reagan. A member of the 99th Congress from the state of California, Robert K. Dornan.
And you know why I had to leave broadcasting? I just couldn't stand being introduced over and over as the second most brilliant talk show host in the United States. It got to me after a while, and you know who the first was.
I'm not even going to touch that one.
Yeah, some guy who went off to New York and left us all lonesome in California. The liberals almost took over the place out there once I was off the air and you'd left. The 82 election went to hell because people didn't believe in supply-side economics soon enough. So what I did to be serious was went with General Danny Graham and laid the groundwork for 2 years for high frontier, space-based defense, Space Defense Initiative, or as Tom Brokaw and all the boys at the networks like to call it, Star Wars.
Yeah, do you know who first came up with that silly name?
Well, the first guy that I saw do it is a congressman from Massachusetts who was driven out of the Senate primary there by Tip O'Neill because O'Neill endorsed Shannon, who lost to Kerry, who beat Cheney. But a guy named Ed Markey, he is... he's one of the lead nuclear freeze guys in the House, and he got up on the floor the morning after the president's brilliant speech of March 23rd, 1983, and he said, "Well, the president has called the Soviet Union an evil empire, so I guess we're Luke Skywalker and the Soviets are Darth Vader, and all of this idea to defend ourselves is some sort of Star Wars." And that night, Brokaw ran a piece of that and loved it. So I don't know who did it before Congressman Ed Markey of Massachusetts and Brokaw, but they were the first ones I heard use it. Well, when you've got one philosophy just dominating the whole judicial system in all of our big urban areas where have insurance, goodbye. But we're going to work on all the sociological ramifications of what caused this guy to rape and murder this 83-year-old woman. And we're going to look for every way we can to bring justice to this perpetrator of a crime, this thug. And somehow or other, we lost the concept of what Reagan said once at a press conference. He said, has anybody forgotten about people who do things because they're rotten? They're just evil. The concept of evil was driven out of our society during the middle and late 60s until finally the great Dr. Menninger felt that he had contributed to it somewhat and wrote a book, remember, called Whatever Happened to Sin?
Right.
And said that there are people who have free will or are normal by all society standards, and they just want to take the easy way out. They'd rather punch people out and take their wallets or purses than work 8 hours a day, and we've completely forgotten that. So here's a guy that just rode the subways in terror. If no one had ever approached him, he would have gone into his old age with no one ever knowing that he carried a concealed weapon.
Governor Mario Cuomo, of course, whom I had on the program prior to coming down here, is still opposed to the death penalty and is condemning what he calls the vigilante. And the man who almost kept Mario Cuomo from going to Albany, Bob Dornan, has just joined us here in our studios. Lew Lehrman.
I'm at Redbeard now because I'm going to Hanoi in a week as soon as the inauguration is over to plead our case again for the missing in action Americans, because I guess the Bobby Garwood story, the 14-year Marine collaborator that had been captured in Vietnam and stayed there for 14 years, but most of it willingly. He wants to clear his conscience, and I've got a meeting set up with him this week, and he's ready to take sodium pentothal, I think. And if it turns out that he's telling the truth, then, brother, we have got one horrible scandal, and the president is right on top of this story. I spoke to him about it December the 5th. He got a major secret briefing, his first in-depth briefing on every piece of evidence from all of the returned boat people. And I'm going to meet with the foreign minister, talk with Ben Gilman of New York, who you've had on the show a lot, Bob. Ben and I leave for Hanoi, I think, on the 8th or 9th of February.
Yeah.
So we'll give you a call when we get back. If you can't get Ben, I'll do it for you.
Well, Bob, I'd love to talk to both of you, and I'm glad that you're going with Ben Gilman and not Steve Solarz.
Well,
although if you went with Steve Solarz, I'd say leave him there.
Right. You know, the funny thing about Steve, because we're very friendly, because we've got several causes that we both agree on. I'm sure you could guess what they are. Israel is one that brings us together. About everything else, we're on opposite poles, except this MIA thing. Steve has really gone up front saying that he wants this thing resolved in a tough way. He hasn't taken the line of, for example, Senator Harkin, that the North Vietnamese are basically angelic, perfect people. Why would they ever lie to us? And just like you got another New Yorker there that I'm proud of. I can't wait to tell him to his face. John LaFalce went down to meet with Danny Ortega, head Sandinista, and it was so turned off that I understand he's going to vote for aid to the Contras. So our zero personality Leninist in Nicaragua, Ortega, can even turn off good New York liberals. So maybe we should let Jane Fonda take him on more tours of the country, starting off at the Russian Tea Room in New York.
The vehicle, lo and behold, etched against the whiteness of the snow, I see a person with white hair, gray hair, a white jogging suit, and he's going at such a steady, fast clip. He's not out of breath at all. I said, only one person jogs with that strength, that tenacity, that consistency, that abundance of air. Only one person I know is in that great a shape, and that's Lew Lehrman. I said, stop the car. I got out of the car. I said, Lew! And Lew couldn't figure out who would be screaming out at him in Washington, D.C. We drove around the circle, and we met him on the other side. And I said, Lew, I'm delighted that we ran into you. I want you on the broadcast. Isn't that the way it happened?
It's exactly the way it happened, Bob. I was amazed because the neck of the woods I run in Washington, it's almost always the same place. There are very few people that I see whom I know, and I was just stunned to see you. I mean, I think of Bob Grant in New York, linked together as one, and there you are, driving your car with your colleagues where I run in the upper part of Capitol Hill, Washington. I was surprised but pleased, and I'm also happy to be on the show with you. Well, some of the most outrageous illusions have been developed as a result of some of the press interpretation, whereas everyone who works for a living in New York and lives and plays in the streets knows the truth. Mr. Goetz invoked the most important doctrine in our Judeo-Christian tradition of law, self-defense. Mr. Goetz was threatened by 4 menacing thugs on the subways, and he defended himself, and he took all necessary means to defend himself, either against the possibility of being stabbed by 4 razor-sharp screwdrivers, or to be the subject of one more anonymous theft, and erased from the subway by 4 sneakered thieves who will never have to pay the punishment. They paid the punishment because he defended himself.
Disallowance of payment of state taxes as a federal deduction, for federal income tax purposes.
There's only one solution for the problem of New York state taxes, and I think we ought to deal with it directly. New York state taxes, New York state and local taxes are the highest in the continental United States. They're about 60% higher than the national average. The solution is not to make a scapegoat of any federal tax reform, which is going to benefit working people and middle-income families from all walks of life, but the solution is to reduce New York state and local taxes to the national average, so that when we reform the tax code to benefit all the American people, New Yorkers are not at a disadvantage. And now the solution which I have proposed is that simultaneously with the tax reform in the second term, which is going to reduce tax rates as much as 50% on those who have to pay the highest bracket, and reduce tax rates all along the line for those who pay even in the lowest brackets, the solution for New Yorkers is to propose simultaneously a 4-year program to reduce New York state taxes, income taxes, sales taxes, and property taxes to the national average. And that finally will put New York on a footing whereby economic renewal will get underway. And instead of having our people go elsewhere to work, we will bring people to New York. Instead of shipping our businesses out of state to North Carolina, Florida, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, we will keep them in New York state. That is the only solution.
Work so much harder than the rest of the country?
New York state has the highest taxes in the country because our politicians from both parties, sad to say, for a period of 30 years, believed that money grew on trees. They believed they could tax the working class and the middle class and everybody who was striving to get up the ladder of life in New York, and invest the enormous sums of money in economic and social experiments, especially welfare state experiments, and that we would never have to pay the piper. What has happened is that because they raised our taxes so high, is that a large part of the working population moved out, thus the tax base got much smaller. A large number of our businesses left New York State, and thus our business tax base got smaller, and thus total tax revenues went down, and tax rates went up even further on individual homeowners, individual business owners, small proprietors, small farmers, as well as the individual income taxpayer himself or herself. That's what happened in New York, and as a result of our uncompetitive business conditions, the economic base has continued to shrink. For example, despite the immense national economic recovery, where we've added 7 million new jobs in the national economy, New York State's economic recovery, though underway, is lagging way behind the national average. And that is going to continue until New York State is made competitive with our neighboring states, as well as states in the Southeast and the Southwest. And all we have to do is bring our tax rates down: corporate income taxes, personal income taxes, property taxes, and sales taxes. For example, 50% of the people who live in the metropolitan New York City area, Long Island, Staten Island, the 5 boroughs, Westchester, drive all the way into New Jersey to buy their clothing, because they don't have to pay the sales tax on it. If you go to a New Jersey shopping center in the afternoon on a Saturday, you would think that it was a modern-day exodus, whereby the children of Israel were crossing the waters to save themselves. That's what everybody does. They flee into New Jersey, do their shopping on Saturday, and they come back. New York merchants lose the business, and of course, we don't collect the sales taxes despite their level. What we do is we export the sales taxes. They pay them in New Jersey at lower levels, and of course, the state coffers of the Treasury of New Jersey prosper while ours shrink. So again, the solution is for the Democrats and the Republicans to get together on a coalition to make New York State competitive again so we can grow again.
About Senator Bradley, what seems to disturb me, not only what he said yesterday about Afghanistan, but what a lot of Democrats, especially liberal-leaning people, seem to say, is that, we have to help the Afghanistanis, but yet not help the rebels in Nicaragua, which is so much closer to us, which would be more of a thorn in our side politically and militarily if worse came to worse.
It's my belief that the Soviet Union, either by design or whether they stumbled onto it, sometimes we, as human beings, we luck into things, and governments sometimes luck into things. You know what I mean, don't you, Jim?
Yes, sir.
I think what happened was they learned a long time ago that if they got surrogates to do their dirty work for them, the liberal numbskulls in this country, and I'm not saying Bill Bradley's a numbskull, but the numbskulls in this country will always support those stooges. Support those stooges enough so that they keep the United States from really taking action. That's why the president smartly and wisely went into Grenada very quickly. Because if there was any debate on it, the Stephen Solarz would have kept us out, that type of thing.
Sure, their excuse would be, we'll have...
Now, the point is, we didn't take action against Castro because he was a Cuban. Even though he was a commie skunk fink, an agent of Moscow, a tool of the Soviets, because he was a Cuban, we really didn't take action against him. Because Daniel Ortega is a Nicaraguan, even though he too is a stooge of the Soviet Union, even though he too wants to see the hammer and sickle fly over every capital in Central America, we don't take action because he's a Nicaraguan. The one time that Soviet troops are directly involved, as in the case of Afghanistan, then you hear some people like Bill Bradley say, we ought to aid the people fighting the Soviets. Did you notice that?
Yeah.
And yet nobody says we ought to aid the people who are trying to overthrow the Marxist regime in Angola, in Mozambique, everywhere in the world that they have used surrogates. North Vietnam, Cambodia. We lose.
Yeah, well, we got to just, try to educate the people a little more.
Well, we got to get enough people in Congress. I don't know what it's going to take. We got to get enough people in Congress who have to realize that surrogates are just as dangerous, just as bad as the Soviet soldiers themselves.
Of course. Answer one question for me. Who's Needlenose Menage?
All Needlenose Menage is the concierge. No, he's actually he's a member of the Yugo Matsututuwanda family.
I don't understand.
And I'm glad you asked that because Mr. Paul Needlenose Menage, who is recognized as America's foremost odds maker and bookmaker.
Everybody Needlenose Menage.
And Mr. Menage says it's going to be the 49ers in the Super Bowl. Pick the 49ers.
Bob?
All right, Mr. Menage, why do you say that?
What?
Well, I've got a very simple rule. If Art Rush says the Dolphins, then I know it's the 49ers. Thank you, Mr. Menage. And I would not shun, even though it's cosmetic, I would not shun a summit meeting with, I guess it would be Chernenko unless the skunk croaks. In that case, Gorbachev or Romanov. It doesn't make any difference who takes his place. They're all getting their poison from the same well.
But let's get back to the Supreme Court. Isn't any man good enough to be, any man of Italian American, of Italian descent, good enough to be in the Supreme Court, has never been appointed.
Who put you up to this?
Decent citizens.
Okay.
And he has never, not one.
Hey, what the manaj?
Manaj is right.
But look, I think you're making too much out of nothing.
Oh, yeah?
Hello?
Yes.
I said I think you're making too much out of
I happen
nothing.
to know a man named Monty Musto, who was a very intelligent man. He was at the Nuremberg.
Well, why are you bringing this up now? You got Governor Cuomo. If you're interested in this sort of thing, you have the governor is Italian.
Yeah.
You have Lieutenant Governor, Mr. Del Bello, although he's choosing to resign. There's Senator Alphonse D'Amato.
Right.
Okay, so we're all Americans. What difference does it make?
Well, let's get back to the other question. Well, why do you think they haven't once appointed one?
Because nobody's appointed one. That's why.
Well, why don't they?
Well, first of all, before anybody can be appointed in the future,
Glad I'm not here.
you want to listen?
I'm listening.
Or do you want to be a cacaron? Do you want to listen?
Yes.
All right. Right now, there are 9 Supreme Court justices. Unfortunately, although there are about 5 mutadevam in that bunch, they're all alive. Thurgood Marshall and Brennan, they'll have to be carried out. Did you hear that? Carried out. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised if they gave orders that if they croak, their aides are supposed to make it appear that they're still alive. Carry them in, prop them up in their chairs, move their mouths. You understand? Or maybe they have, maybe they croaked already and they've got mannequins built. How do we know that it's not a mannequin of William Brennan? How do we know that? We don't know. Maybe there's some guy inside operating it. That's how mean they are. 4 years, the president will get a chance to make a couple of appointments. Then when he makes the appointments, all I'm interested in is that the guy
good enough, right?
is a good, solid, non-bleeding heart, non-knee-jerk liberal in the ACLU vein like William Brennan.
Yes.
Okay? I don't care what his ethnic background is. I'll be back live in the studios on Tuesday. And let me say, you people are certainly consistent. I can be down here talking about the inauguration, but you talk about what you want to talk about. Till next week, Bob Guy reminding you, your influence counts. Use it. God bless President Reagan.
I'd like to give another example of Kenneth Clark's so-called thinking. A few years back, he was advising that the advanced students in the class spend their time helping the less advanced students with their studies, instead of the advanced students doing the best they could with their own minds and having the school or the teacher, helping the less advanced students.
Yes, it's a type of bankrupt, discredited theorizing that Kenneth Clark embraces, which in effect says, hey, wait a minute, don't raise the bridge, lower the river.
Exactly.
Now, hopefully we learned from what happened during that era, and hopefully that will never be repeated.
Well, I think the Christian groups carry forward and all.
But I got to tell you something. I don't have one smidgen of guilt over slavery. I don't have one smidgen of guilt over the Holocaust. Nobody's going to lay a guilt trip on me because of what a bunch of jerks did before I was born. You got it, pal? So drop it, will ya? I'm tired of it already. Thank you. My beneficiaries, my loved ones, my children, I'm just going to try to save them every possible dime, whatever that dime's going to be worth by the time I croak in about 100 years. First of all, I wouldn't want any life-extending or agony-extending cockamamie machines on. That's number one. Number two, you donate your worthless, meaningless cadaver to medical science so that those skunks called funeral directors don't take money that should go to your children. And everybody ought to will their bodies immediately. I want everybody to sign a paper tomorrow willing their bodies to their favorite institution.
Let me ask you a question.
Let's cheat the undertakers.
Think it over.
Do we have another call?
Think it over, Bob.
Yeah. By the way,
Yeah.
were you born a cajon, or did you go to school to become one? No evidence to indicate that it's happened massively.
No.
As far as the homeless are concerned, most homeless are homeless because they choose to be homeless. There is nobody out there who has to be out there if they don't want to be. There are enough stipends that a person can qualify for. There are enough places they can go. And some of them could even work, except most of them are whacked out. Most of them are alienated either through a series of traumas in their life or because they just couldn't handle life itself and want to alienate themselves.
One thing, though.
So I have absolutely no compassion for the so-called homeless. Someone who is tossed out, that's a different matter. But there's nobody that's tossed out trying to get in.
Okay.
All right, listen, let me move on. That hum on your phone line is driving me crazy anyway. Thank you. I have no use for the ACLU, but I'm going to shock you. This is one of those very rare times when I'm in agreement with them.
Could you expound on why, Bob?
Well, because if those people want to be out on the street, let them stay out on the street.
Okay.
If that's what they want, fine.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, if they all froze to death, I mean, who would be harmed?
No one at all. And I agree.
We might be better off, for heaven's sake.
Your sentiment, exactly. My own.
I mean, I know it sounds terrible for the guy to actually say it, but a lot of people think it. Sometimes I talk about the subway system in Montreal, or in Paris, or in Moscow. I've been on those subway systems, but I shouldn't talk about subway systems in foreign countries. I could talk about the subway system in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. You don't even see a gum wrapper on the floor. It is absolutely spotless.
Well, what's the difference between that and here? Why?
I think the difference is that the officials there are not going to tolerate what the officials here tolerate. You see, what we have here, and whether it was the Tower of Jelly, whether it was the Almost Mayor, whether it's King Koch, seems to make no difference. We tolerate it. If the mayor would order a crackdown, and I say let it begin with the graffiti, I say that would be a most important battle to win because it would signal two things. It would tell the people like you that we are a civilized society. We are gaining control. We do care. We don't want people dehumanized. And it would also tell the brigands, the Visigoths, the Vandals, those savages out there, it would tell them, look, we're not going to take it anymore. We're tired of having the tail wag the dog. We're tired of it.
I mean, I've been riding the subways for a few years. I have never seen anyone do graffiti. Where does this happen?
It happens in the yards. It happens a lot of times when late at night when the trains, when there's nobody.
Where they store them.
Yeah, but with impunity, they walk around with these spray cans, which they steal with impunity.
What?
You don't think for 1 minute they buy the spray paint, do you?
How come there's no one protecting the train?
And the magic markers? Well, for a couple of reasons. Number one, those TA people, they have to get their sleep. And why not sleep on company time?
Right.
Thank you for to what Mr. Wattenberg, who had worked in the Lyndon B. Johnson administration, says. Politicians can stand almost anything except ridicule. It's okay if voters disagree with you, but when they laugh at you, you're finished. That fact of political life may lead to a first step toward salvation for the Democratic Party. Next week, the Democratic National Committee will come to Washington to elect a new chairman. They will also have a chance to begin to roll back the most egregious symbol of how ridiculous the Democrats have become, the caucus and quota system. It all began a few years ago when the DNC voted to amend their charter in order to recognize officially a black caucus, a women's caucus, and a Hispanic caucus. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with caucuses. A caucus, after all, is usually only an informal gathering of like-minded individuals intent on political action. But of course, the groups began demanding a piece of the action. And so the DNC now also officially recognizes the Lesbian and Gay Caucus, the Liberal Progressive Caucus, the Business and Professional Caucus, and the Asian Pacific Caucus. So 7 caucuses already exist. Now additional caucuses want to sign up. Native American, Indians, Hillel, Jews, ethnic, which one assumes would include all the other eths who have been left out, and agricultural. That would make 11 caucuses. One should assume that others will form. What about conservatives? Why can't they have a caucus? And what about moderates, men, and Muslims? How about a caucus for heterosexuals? So what? After all, what's so terrible about like-minded activists being officially recognized? Consider the next step. The members of the caucuses demand representation on DNC bodies as caucus members, not as DNC members. That has happened. The DNC bylaws call for at least one member of each caucus to be represented on each working committee. And the caucuses typically do the designating. And he goes on. He says, it does not end. The Democrats have mandated that a new fairness commission dealing with delegate selection include all the caucus types consistent with their proportional representation in the party. That is, quotas, plain and simple. The rules also specify that such representation include persons of all sexual preference. He asks, how does one determine the proportion of homosexuals? The Lesbian and Gay Caucus thinks 10% is about the right quota. But what about other sexual preferences? Food fetishists, ticklers, and what about other kind of sexual preference? People who just prefer sex to a boring Super Bowl. How did all this happen? It is, after all, patently ridiculous. It happened because non-ridiculous political leaders got mugged by the caucus activists. Support our views, they were told, or else. So Democratic presidents or people running for president figured it out this way. I may as well give in. If I win, I'll control the process anyway. If I lose, it's someone else's problem. And so you have a Democratic Party where every special interest has a caucus and a quota willing to mug the candidate, forcing strong candidates to act like wimps. Remember this? Polls don't vote, people vote. Voters see this, or how about this? I never lied to you. Voters see this, they don't like it, and they vote for the Republicans. Will the Democrats finally stand up to this nonsense and end it? Several resolutions coming up before the DNC meeting propose to do just that. And then Ben says, will the party act or face mounting ridicule? My guess is they'll face mounting ridicule.
He's got to be better than Mr. Koch. I think that...
You want to bet? You want to go back? You want to go back to Abe Beam? You want to go back to the Tower of Jelly?
Okay, I grant you that.
Or they laugh as they did against with Hugh Carey. Now, with Hugh Carey, they were laughing because here this guy found this sex pot that got his testosterone running, you know.
Yes.
And the guy was so horny he couldn't even contain himself in public, if you remember,
yes.
with NG. I mean, here, the spectacle of the governor of a state practically having an intimate act in public was incredible. You see, you know, he gets so carried away.
I agree with you.
I admit that the woman had a lot of sex appeal, but, I mean, gee, you know.
Yes. I see your point.
I mean, you know, at least I knew a police commissioner who used a couch in an office. You know.
Yeah, she was bound.
So they were laughing at him because of the bad dye job that he had. They were laughing at Hugh Carey for the wrong reason. Bob Grant reminding you, your influence counts. Use it. Get Gaddafi. Billy from Bayside. You know, I'm glad to hear from you, Billy from Bayside, because Billy of Brooklyn has deserted me. I don't know why, but he has. He's probably watching the Super Bowl over and over again. He probably listened to my buddy and bet on Miami.
Which year was that?
By the way, Paul Needlenose Menadja is going around bragging, and he's a very wealthy man because Paul Needlenose Menadja said, Frisco ain't a romp. To focus on a song later, I want you, please stay awake. Nobody goes to sleep. Nobody does that. Oh, by the way, I'm happy to make this announcement. The Bob Grad program is the only program in radio enjoyed by listeners and non-listeners alike. I'm happy to be able to tell you that even those of you who are not listening right now are enjoying this program.
You think that putting it up in a heavily populated area, even though there's some dioxin in it, you think that it's fair from...
First of all, there's no dioxin in the incinerator, pal. So don't go being an alarmist, Sam. Don't scare people. Where are you getting this? Where are you getting this dioxin in the garbage, huh? Where are you getting that?
Okay, the other thing I would like to ask you, Sam, Bob.
No, I'm Bob, you're Sam.
I'm sorry, Bob.
That's all right. Maybe we'll switch someday.
Bob, choice. I mean, I really think it's going to happen.
Well, I think you're a victim of the media then, because some jerks and Lowell Weicker.
Kennedy.
Notice I said some jerks and Lowell Weicker, and not some jerks like. When they go show their black constituents how brave they are. You know, remember the song from Chorus Line, What I Did for Love? Well, maybe you don't. But, you know, is it what I did for whatever? They go get themselves arrested. That's not gonna change anything in South Africa. And until tomorrow, your influence counts. Use it. Get Gaddafi.
A gentleman, a black elderly man in the west side of Chicago, a gang-ravaged area, always minding his own business, coming home with 2 groceries in his hands, approached by 2 young thugs, slimy hoodlums from a local gang, approached him with a knife and said, give us your money or we're going to take your life. This old man used a little bit of chicanery because clearly he was a bit more streetwise in the Bernard Goetz types of the world. He said, oh, yeah, I'll give you the money. Just take it easy. Don't kill me. And he put the groceries down, reached into his pocket, gave them the wallet, but in the other hand pulled out a .32, fired 3 shots, one of them striking the first youth who was closest to him, killing him later on in the hospital, the wound itself. The other bandito fled, naturally out of sheer terror, not assuming that the victim was going to turn the tables. And you know what the political and police officials took as an attitude out there? Not the crankery of an Ed Koch, who was labeling Mr. Goetz a vigilante even after the first day, or the intellectually snobbery attack on the part of our Governor Cuomo against the average strap-hanger, Mr. Goetz, and claiming that the likes of you, Bob, and mine, and all those people out there in your audience were nothing but psychotic individuals reliving a Charles Bronson fantasy death wish. And yet I dare say we're bright enough to elect them on Election Day. We're enlightened enough to put them in office. But when we support the likes of a Bernard Hugo Goetz, we're depraved lunatics. Notice in Chicago, not even the threat of an arrest. All they said to this gentleman was, please, come in because we need you to sign the complaint so we can arrest that Yahoo and thug who ran away. And do you know the reason he stayed out of sight for 3 days and did not turn himself over to sign the complaint? He was afraid of the retribution of the gangs that have already taken 97 lives in the streets of Chicago due to gang violence.
Curtis, I know that you don't pull your punches and you're not afraid to tell it the way you think it is. Do you suppose that the case in Chicago was so much more simple because the person firing the gun as well as the victimized robber were both black?
No question, it was easier to understand. There were no Pandora boxes to open. And in a city that boasts the Honorable Jesse.Jackson and Louis Farrakhan of the Nation of Islam, not a peep came from their mouths.
But don't you think they would have been ranting and railing as Al Sharpton has done? Don't you think they would have been ranting and railing if that elderly gentleman, instead of being black, was white?
they would have been in a house of one even in Chicago. They could have allayed racial suspicions. They could have indicated possibly a reorientation of Ku Klux Klan and vigilanteism in the U.S. as it was years ago, but they'd have not got past the first yard on Soldiers Field on a cold winter day because it was the blacks in Chicago who had been victimized by these marauding gangs of youths who spoke up in one unity cry. And in fact, even in Chicago, the mother of the victim said, "You know, somebody had to stop my son. I'm sorry it was with a bullet, but surely the courts never stopped him." So I dare say that in the long term, I think it'll be far and few in between that we hear those spicy words out of the governor's mouth when referring to the guardian angels.
Do you think his, and I'm characterizing this, elitist attitude, old line liberal limousine attitude, will haunt him in 1986 when he seeks re-election?
Well, he's not your normal, typical ivory tower intellectual. He, more than anyone else, has been the scene of victim after victim in his own family. His wife who's been mugged, his child twice.
It hasn't affected him one bit.
His father-in-law nearly beaten within
hasn't made a dent.
Breaths of his life. Not only is he not for enforcement of the death penalty, which many a citizen, not only in this state but across the country, is in favor of, but in the case of Bernard Hugo Goetz, immediately he took the intellectual approach, condemned the man, verbally vigilanteized him before all the facts went, and now when the grand jury has been heard, the peers, as we were told, the justice system would come to Mr. Goetz's defense if he was correct. I noticed in his presentation a little bit of resentment, a resigning afterthought that, well, maybe the grand jury was being led by its emotions.
Hello?
Yes.
I'd like to say this. They must start with the premise that nobody likes crime, liberal, conservative, or what have you, Mr. Sliwa and Bob Grant. The fact is this, that the governor doesn't have to worry about people being for him. I mean, what will happen if we're all walking around with guns? We'll all be laying dead in the street. There was a car...
You wouldn't carry a gun, and if you did, you wouldn't know how to shoot it anyway.
Want to, of course, even if I did.
But if you shot yourself, you'd survive. That would be our luck.
Now, let me tell you why I called. I called about this. Now, Mr. Goetz...
You called to ruin my life. Can I get rid of you?
No, I never... Who? Why? Well, you're there, aren't you? You told me I have the right to speak.
Yeah, but you called last night. I'm a little tired of you. You're on WABC Talk Radio. I mean, some people overdo it, Curtis. You're on
Bob, as we talk about that fellow who lays in a life support machine, and I've been through that myself. I had a guardian angel who was in a life support machine for 6 months before he passed away because of the bullet of a thug in the South Bronx. No, that was Juan Oliva. He was the last angel to pass on while they were looking for a mother.
In Newark, wasn't it?
No, that was in a playground of the South Bronx.
Yeah.
That was just 2 summers ago. So I know the devastating effects. But in this case, Darrell Cabey, just 3 months before, found it within himself to take a sawed-off shotgun in the very same neighborhood of the South Bronx that he lived. And to a neighbor of his, a young black male who was wearing a sheepskin coat, he decided to take the pointed end of that shotgun and stick it up against his temple and told him, take off the sheepskin coat. Now, had the fella not followed his commands, I dare say he'd have blasted him to smithereens. So, when we feel a little pity, a little remorse for Darrell Cabey, just remember Darrell Cabey was the type who could easily point a gun at someone else, and had they not acceded to his demands, had they not waved the white flag and rolled over, he'd have laid that man 6 feet under without thinking twice.
Matter of time before some hungry agent at the William Morris office, dangles $1 million in front of him to sell his wife's story, or maybe even do endorsements for a gun manufacturer.
Well, can I ask you a question? You know you have a mayor in
Did
this...
you get the snide remark that this creep just made? This lousy little creep, this weasel, this punk. Listen, you come down here, I'll punch your nose right down your throat, you creep. Get off my phone.
Oh, Bob.
Yes, hello.
So what if Goetz sells a story? They gave Berkowitz a book, so what the heck? Now, that's not what...
Don't compare Goetz with Berkowitz.
Well, let me just ask the caller this, and then you can finish, caller. You've got a mayor in this town, an elected official. He's already written a book. He's gone on publicity tours on it. He has book signings galore. He does Muppet movies. He's on Saturday Night Live. He's with Mr. T. He's everywhere on the screen. He might as well be the person who's sitting on Entertainment Tonight and take the place of Ron Hendren. But the fact of the matter is, we don't hold him responsible to go down in the subway and provide public safety. So if the mayor can extol his virtues in terms of the fluff and puff world of Hollywood, why immediately before this man, Mr. Goetz, has even had a chance to breathe free air again, are we indicting him for wanting to capitalize when he hasn't made a move?
It's the last refuge of someone who wants to zing somebody like Goetz. They say, well, he'll get money for selling his rights.
Who cares?
Well, apparently some people do, like that snide individual ahead of you.
The top layer is, let's assume the police are doing the job, and they go out and they collar the hoodlum, and they bring him into the courts. What immediately happens? A pack of hyenas descend upon this suspect. This person who is probably raped or beaten or savaged, it's called a lawyer. And they get a thrill out of being able to walk into that courtroom. It's like a chessboard for them. A thrill out of being able to find that one little loophole, that one little method of the law that they can utilize to set that criminal free. And they'll ask for pretrial hearings, postponements, depositions, interrogatories. Clog up the court system so that you, the victim, or the witness who has been good enough to come down 16, 18, 20 times to follow through on the criminal justice system, now must be fearful of losing your job, of not being able to keep up with the payments. And now they slide off on a technicality. The lawyer walks out knowing his client is guilty of sin and walks out with a roll of money in his pocket to soothe his conscience. And what about the judges who are always looking out the window at 3 o'clock hoping they can get in 9 holes of golf before the sun goes down? When industry has a backlog of orders, don't they go 3 shifts? Why are our judges and our attorneys, those elitists in our societies, those intellectuals, why is it they can't work past 5 o'clock? If we have a backlog of criminals, well, let's get it so we have 3 shifts in the courts. The young whippersnappers coming out of Columbia and NYU and Harvard and Stanford, let them work the graveyard shift and the swing shift like the average blue-collar workers out there when they first get their start. And I dare say that it would allow for the victims and the witnesses to come in after work so that they can pursue the final product of the justice. And when a cop makes a collar late at night, he doesn't have to do pounds of paperwork. He brings them right down to the court in the borough and arraigns them right on the spot.
Might say I'm an ad hoc committee of one trying to get the death penalty in New York State, and I have come up so far with just one thing, and that is a slogan. And namely, here it is, vote for the death penalty, don't be Cuomo toast.
The guardian angels are going to be taking a very heavy stance on the death penalty because this coming Tuesday in Bronx Supreme Court, an 18-year-old punk goes on trial for having gunned down a guardian angel in the commission of his duty 2 Julys ago in a public school playground in the South Bronx while he was looking for a woman and her lost child.
Why is he coming up to trial now, 2 years later?
2 years later, and this is with Mario Marola, a district attorney who's favorably disposed to the guardian angels, trying to push aside the usual bureaucratic red tape. But I tell you this much, when that man stands trial for having assassinated a guardian angel, you will not only see us picketing outside the Bronx Supreme Court, but we are going back to Albany. Yes, Mario, you promised you were going to go ride the subways, and you didn't. But we're going to take this cause back up to Albany, right outside your house again, and push you on this question of a death penalty. I think that people who kidnap children, sodomize them and rape them, as we see of epidemic proportions around this country, who wantonly, with callous indignation, shoot down human beings without rhyme or reason, are not deserving of life without parole. They are deserving of having the juice put on them. And I'll tell you this much, if Mario Cuomo doesn't have the chutzpah to pull the switch, that's the one job I will take and give up the guardian angels. I'll gladly pull the switch on these punks.
How do you like that? This guy's been offered a job as a radio commentator, job as a mayor of the city of New York. He turns both those down. He wants to be executioner.
I go for that 100%. Just in conclusion, let me repeat, vote for the death penalty, don't be comatose.
Yes, Bob?
Yes.
This is Frank, Bob.
Hello, Frank.
How are you? I'd like to speak to Curtis Sliwa, please.
Yes, Frank.
Curtis, I think that the Bernard Goetz incident proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that when the law fails the people must become the law. And my friend, I had the privilege of seeing you debate on TV the resident alcoholic of the Daily News. You so soundly thrashed him that you made him look like a complete buffoon. I noticed that whenever it comes to a subnormal insect or social defect
hypocritical liberalism that has rent asunder the very fabric of this society. You know, every time one of these social defectives commits a crime of murder or mayhem, immediately he comes out and the rest of the liberals with the same pathetic, hackneyed, hypocritical redundancies, the same litany of get them a job. If they only had a job. Well, let's take that type of hypocrisy one step further. Why don't they get, when he was alive, Carlo Gambino a job? If everybody has a job, according to them, there'll be no such thing as crime. But didn't they pour billions of untold billions into these so-called social programs, summer jobs programs, which were nothing more than ransom, which had kept this society at bay? Let's face facts. This society must have its subways clear because the subways are the arteries and veins of a society. And when the arteries of a society are infected with a cancer, one does not get a cancer an occupation. One cuts the malignancy out.
That's right. And you stop eating food with cholesterol so that you don't clog up the veins and clog up the arteries. But don't you know, we're supposed to feel sorry for these punks. We're supposed to pity these criminals. I mean, they come from these terrible areas. They're committing these crimes. I mean, we're supposed to worry about whether or not they have wall-to-wall carpeting in their jail cells, that when they're in Sing Sing, whether or not they have stereo music and an excellent law library so they can figure out how they're going to get off the hook on their next rap.
I might add that you mentioned Mr. Breslin, who was my opponent on...
Is that who he was talking about?
Yes. But I'll tell you why he took that attitude. It had nothing to do with the reality of the situation. What has happened in our society is we've become the conservatives or the liberals. Now, if you notice, George Will and Pat Buchanan in their editorials, along with yourself and a host of other commentators, embraced the actions of Mr. Goetz. And the liberal columnists, and I took my heat from people who were usually favorable to us, Mr. Breslin being one, Mr. Caldwell another, and a host of nationally syndicated columnists who felt that our support for Mr. Goetz in moral and physical and financial was morally wrong. I might add that the reason that they opened up a Pandora's box was the knee-jerk reaction. Hey, we can't be supportive of something that George Will and Pat Buchanan is supportive of if we get locked into these political ideologies and always see it through only one side of the spectrum. I really care. I want to see results. And right now in the Goetz situation, I have to condemn the liberals because they opened up the Pandora's box of racism, which did not exist. In the hole in the ground, in the subterranean hell that's called the subway system, it was the blacks and Hispanics who raised their voices in unanimous support of the actions of the government.
Curtis, I don't blame you for feeling frustrated. Nevertheless, you know full well that that's why Jimmy Breslin takes the position he does, because Goetz was white and KB and company were black. You know full well that's why Caldwell, who writes for the Daily News and has his column should be called Racially Speaking. You know that's why he condemned you. Also, Al Sharpton, who, and this should come as no surprise to anybody, is called Reverend, aren't they all? Al Sharpton, and I just want to quote directly. This is typical wire copy that those of us who read AP and UPI wire copy are forced to see day in and day out. This is like a sequence of nonstop, wall-to-wall cliches. The Reverend Al Sharpton, comma, a black activist, comma, says the indictment was tantamount to a commendation. Close quotes. He says, quote again, the Grand Wizard of the KKK, in parentheses, in case nobody knows what that stands for, Ku Klux Klan, would be proud of this grand jury. The Manhattan jury indicted Goetz, blah, 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 blah. I don't think Sharpton's comments are even worthy of being quoted, but the wire services, of course, did quote them. Meteorologist Hank Berg's forecast tonight: increasing clouds, periods of snow or snow showers developing. Let's all say together. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Woof!
Confidence in law and order, which is the basis of this country, should be shocked and dismayed at this verdict. It's a perversity. And I believe that any intelligent person never expected it, and I'm just overwhelmed. And I think this is a very sad day.
Well, number one, I don't carry weapons, and our organization, the Guardian Angels, will never carry weapons. But one thing you must understand is, if you want to believe he went over the edge, if you want to believe that those 4 thugs never showed screwdrivers and only asked him for a cigarette, asked him for the time to see if he had a Rolex watch, because they probably would have ended it right all there, and then proceeded to ask for $5. If you want to believe that that preemptive strike consisted of him pulling out a gun and just blindly shooting 4 shots at 4 suspects who surrounded him, I dare say that if you've been on the subway, you know it's like no other scenario. You're enclosed. You're entrapped to begin with. You don't have a lot of moving room. The fellas were wearing sheepskin coats, which are very fashionable. But a person knows that the sheepskin coat is also used to hide weapons of your own. And if you're confronted and you know to begin with that there are no police, no guardian angels, and that those very citizens who were sitting there with you, who share the same terror, chose not to get involved, not to physically intervene or verbally intervene, and you have consciously, as an individual, decided, I will not give you $5, then you must assume that in denying them that money, that you have attacked their machismo. You have, in a sense, discredited them amongst their 3 other peers. And do you think they're just going to stand there and say, well, not this chump, we'll just have to choose another chump?
Could I comment on that? May I say something?
Please, we're listening.
Yeah. Look, you're very well spoken, obviously. You're very dramatic. You gave me a rerun of the whole episode, which I've read 1,000 times in the newspaper, Curtis. Re-emphasizing, rehashing the facts doesn't make any...
Well, sir, let's point out this way. Have you ever been in any type of a violent situation? When you're in the middle of a fight, or when you are in the middle of being attacked, time flies very, very quickly. And even if it's just a street brawl or a fight, it seems to you at that time that your life is in danger. You're going to do whatever you have to do in order to protect yourself. And I dare say that we cannot sit back as Monday morning quarterbacks and say, well, he should have fired a warning shot and then opened his gun on them. He should have done this. He should have done that. You're talking about somebody who had previously been the victim of a violent attack, who had sustained permanent injuries as a result of that previous mugging. And I dare say that it's enough having to depend upon the New York City subway system, riding it every single day. That's enough to drive anybody over the edge.
Bob, in your good conscience, are you saying a trial shouldn't have been held to bring out all the facts? Do you really believe it in good conscience?
Let me say this. I believe that Ed Koch was right when he said it was Solomon-esque, the decision coming out of the grand jury. I think you're overlooking a couple of facts here. Number one, I think you're overlooking the fact that these 4 thugs chose not to testify for very good reason, because they know that if they had taken the stand to testify, if they had gone under oath, 2 things would have happened. Number one, they would have been forced to reveal what they were really doing on that subway, what their confrontation with Bernard Goetz was. And number 2, and perhaps even more of consideration to them, was the fact that they would have lost their immunity. They would have lost the immunity that they wanted for other cases that are pending against them. And in other words, they were saying, in case anybody had any doubt, they were saying, we are not the average citizen. We are not the average shooting victim. As a matter of fact, we're part of that army of predators out there. Only we were singled out because we happened to pick on the wrong guy at the wrong time. So I think you're overlooking that fact that they chose to protect themselves because they have reason to be vulnerable. They chose not to testify. All
right, a trial, all right, well, I don't have to repeat myself, but I think that this, a trial and should have been held, and it's a shock. It's an enormous...
No shock to me. It's a pleasant bit of news to me and most people.
But, Mr. Caller, you have to understand that what the grand jury did see was an unedited, uncut version of his complete confession without the benefit of a lawyer to cut in and say, no, don't answer this, or to tone down his language. He spoke freely for 3 hours, being grilled by police officers, first from New Hampshire and then the city of New York, and based on that alone, the grand jury, who is just like you and I, decided, no, we would not indict. Now, they didn't hear from Troy Canty and his crew, and they didn't hear from Bernard Goetz except through film when he did not have the advice of a lawyer. So I dare say I don't think you or I would want our unedited testimony put before a grand jury, and more than likely anyone with any legal sense would have bet their last George Washington in their pocket that anybody speaking in an unedited fashion would have been indicted. Sir, that when we were at that Senate subcommittee hearing, probably the most dramatic testimony came not from a politician or someone who's prominent in the media, but rather from the wife of a slain police officer in the Bronx who had been killed by this punk who had already been out on parole for having killed somebody previously.
Talking about Juan Augusto?
Juan the Slime Augusto, who gunned down this police officer, and I might add, callously and indifferently, all proud and busting his buttons, you know, feeling almost like he was being, you know, aggrandized by this. And our system let us down. Now, wasn't that the same system, Bob, that Mayor Koch and Governor Cuomo were talking about when they said it would protect us? Here are police officers, the most esteemed elements in our society. It can't even protect the cops and their families. How dare these political officials in their ivory towers claim that that very same system that can't protect the police is going to protect the average Joe and Sally? How many other criminals who've been out on parole for having murdered people have gone back to rape, sodomize, kill, and just pulverize people into the ground? If we were to count all those, how dare anybody question, well, he shot 2 of them in the back? How many honest, decent, law-abiding, God-fearing people with no weapons on them, turning the money over, literally sometimes giving their bodies over to these criminals, were shot in the back of the head, and we turn these punks back loose in the street? I'm sorry, I can't shed a tear if he happened to shoot 2 of these mutants in the back.
Yeah, well, you know, hello, Bob.
Yes?
How you doing?
What's on your mind, sir?
Let me talk to Curtis, please.
All right. You see, I've learned, Curtis, that when they call and say, how you doing, they're looking for a spot where the shiv can go in. What they're doing is just
like screwdriver.
Yeah. I have to.
This guy is concerned with how I'm doing as much as he is with Chernenko. He probably is worried more about Chernenko than me, for example. So don't give me that stall tactic, pal.
Well, it's coming from the mouth and not from the heart. I happen to agree with what Reverend Sharpton said, and I think Bernard Goetz is a nut. And I don't think Curtis has the slightest interest in trying to curb crime or seeing that justice is done. I think he's in it, he's exploiting the whole situation. I think he's a parasite. And I'm glad that Lisa has found a job, but I'd like to find out from Curtis, when will he himself get an honest job?
By the way, what do you do, sir?
Well, let Curtis answer the question and then...
No, what do you do, sir? I mean, here you come out of the woodwork, obviously from the Middle West, and you want to know, about the guy finding a job.
Bob, I'm not from the Middle West. I'm from the Caribbean.
I see. How long have you been in my country, sir?
About as long as you have been here.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I had a conversation with an Indian, and he told me that all of y'all were from someplace else.
You know, I take a very dim view of intruders into my land who find fault with everything and want to pick our society apart. I want you to know that. I'm on record as telling you that I'm aware of where you're coming from, and I mean that in a vernacular sense as well as a literal sense.
But Bob, we're both from someplace else.
I was born and raised in the United States of America. I'm an American citizen. Are you?
Well, the American Indian would tell you differently. The American Indian...
You got all the 1960s cliches down pat, pal.
Well, but I asked Curtis a question and you're not letting him answer.
I don't think you have a right to ask him the question until you tell us what kind of work you do.
I'm an auditor.
An auditor?
Yeah.
All right, he answered the question. Curtis, you want to answer his question?
Well, first he mentioned Reverend Al Sharpton, a legend in his own mind.
You too?
If you remember when he was outside the hospital where poor Mr. Cabey was laid up, he had his little candlelight procession. Who were the 2 women that came up and verbally abused him for his actions? did they not happen to be two elderly black women who worked as nurses in that hospital?
Yes, but Curtis, wait a minute. There are also white people who think that Goetz has done wrong.
Oh, I'm sure there are plenty. There are many of those.
Well, I think so, because this is not a racial matter, although the caller is obviously looking upon this racially.
Why is he referring to the little old black ladies?
No, I referred to that because Reverend Sharpton was trying to project this as some type of racist attack, and his own people repudiated him. In fact, who does Al Sharpton represent but himself and a handful of other mutants, who I might add that he himself has been associated with? Wasn't he the guy responsible for the Jackson concert and the provisions of security? And weren't his people attacking people with crowbars and other assorted weapons throughout the United States? And what about all the monies from the Jackson concerts in which they were charging $25, $30 a head that were unaccounted for at the end?
But Curtis, what does Michael Jackson have to do with Brennan?
No, we're talking about Reverend Sharpton, not Michael Jackson. He was too busy singing on stage while Sharpton was counting the proceeds with your other fine man who needs an auditor, Mr. King, Don King. I dare say that there are enough irreputable people who have backed these four hoodlums that I dare say they have skeletons of their own. Like, in terms of myself, when I started the group, it was well known I was a manager of McDonald's in the South Bronx.
Yeah, and you're a very frustrated manager at that.
I see. Well, I wasn't...
Well, this guy's not an auditor. He's a psychiatrist.
No doubt. No doubt. He probably ate some of the food I served him in that McDonald's. That's why it caused him brain damage.
Well, we're both suffering from the same thing. Okay, Curtis, can I ask you one more question?
Yes.
Why, you said some of the people who appear on the cover of Jet magazine do cocaine and drugs and stuff like that. Can you quote one?
I pointed out Time, People, Jet, and Ebony, and the person I was referring to was Richard Pryor, who makes fun of himself for having blown himself up. Even in his own act, questions the intelligence of people who would make him a hero for having blown himself up. And here it is, he's making millions of dollars and laughing all the way to the bank.
Yes, but, I mean, why do you pick on Richard Pryor?
Didn't I not also pick on Boy George and John McEnroe?
Oh, John McEnroe does drugs?
I didn't say drugs. I did say, though, that instead of a tennis racket, it seems he's carrying around a large baby's rattle, and every time he can't get his way, he's making threats, innuendos, and just can't seem to play the game by the rules like the rest of us.
All right, pal, time to put that egg in your shoe and beat it.
A lot of people out there, including Mr. Goetz, I spoke to very briefly because he thanked us for the donations we had turned over to him. He mentioned your name in key words. He said, if you have a chance, give Bob Grant my thanks, because all those other New Yorkers out there who really rallied the public around me, without them, we would not have the kind of forum we have today. And when it comes from a guy who's in the bull ring, surrounded by all those adversaries who are trying to sear him, bisect him, dissect him, try to analyze what his motives were, when he can take time out to specifically pinpoint individuals who crusaded in his behalf.
Until Sunday, yes, till Sunday, Bob Grant, thanks to Carol Richardson for another superb job. Till Sunday, your influence counts. Use it. Get everybody! Well, I see that another skunk in the Kremlin is supposed to be dying, and he'll join his comrades. He'll be joining Joe Stalin, the most vicious of all, and that beast Brezhnev, and that slimy Andropov. I see that Konstantin Chernenko is seriously ill, might be on the verge of dying, according to the State Department.